Have you ever had moments in your life when you felt like God was late? Like you were praying, you were working, you were waiting, and nothing was happening? And then, just when you're about to give up, something unbelievable happens. So unbelievable that people who doubted you, people who mocked you, even people close to you, can't help but laugh because they don't understand how it came to pass. That's what I want to talk about today. Why God's timing is so unbelievable that people will laugh at you. See, we live in a culture that demands speed. Fast food, instant results, same-day delivery. We're trained to think that if something doesn't happen right now, it's not going to happen at all. And because of that, many people misunderstand God. They think he's slow, or that he forgot them, or worse, that maybe he doesn't care. But let me tell you something. God's timing is never late. In fact, it's so exact, so perfect, so strategically orchestrated that when it finally happens, it looks unbelievable. It looks almost ridiculous. And you know what makes it even harder? While you're in that waiting season, while you're holding on to faith, people will laugh at you. They'll laugh at your prayers, they'll laugh at your dreams, they'll laugh at your hope. And maybe you felt that sting, the sting of being mocked for believing in something no one else can see. But let me encourage you. That laughter is not a sign that you're wrong. It's often the greatest sign that you're right where you're supposed to be. Because when it finally comes to pass, the very people who laughed will be the ones scratching their heads, wondering how you made it through. I remember seasons in my life where I thought God had forgotten me. I had plans, deadlines, goals, and none of them were happening on my schedule. I would pray and then immediately look around for change, only to find silence. But what I didn't realize back then was that God was aligning things behind the scenes, things I couldn't see. And when those pieces finally came together, it wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a testimony. It wasn't just progress. It was undeniable proof that his timing wasn't just, it was unbelievable. And here's the thing, this is not just about my story or your story. This has been the story of humanity for thousands of years. People laughed at Noah when he built the ark, because he was preparing for something they couldn't imagine. People laughed at Abraham when he said he would have a child in his old age, because their logic couldn't fit with God's promise. People laughed at Jesus on the cross, because they couldn't see the resurrection that was coming. Over and over, history shows us that God's timing has always looked foolish to the world until it becomes undeniable. So in this video, I want to go deeper. I want to show you why God's timing is so unbelievable. Not just in vague ideas, but in real, practical patterns that you can look for in your own life. Because if you're in that place right now where you feel forgotten or mocked or even ridiculed for believing in something bigger than yourself, I want you to see that you are not alone. There's a reason it feels this way, and there's a reason it's so hard to explain to others. By the end of this, you're going to see 5 clear patterns. 5 ways God moves that will make you understand why his timing always shocks people, why it always looks impossible, and why it often leads to people laughing at you before they clap for you. These are not just theories. These are truths that have played out in scripture, in history, and in the lives of countless people, including my own. So lean in, because today we're going to unpack the 5 patterns of God's timing that make it so unbelievable. And my hope is that when you hear them, you'll stop doubting, you'll stop comparing, and you'll start trusting. Because the laughter of others is nothing compared to the joy that comes when God's timing finally unfolds in your life. The first pattern you have to understand is this. God's timing isn't human timing. And that sounds simple, almost cliche, but let me tell you, living it out is one of the hardest lessons in life. See, we're trained to think in calendars, deadlines, and schedules. We live by clocks that tick second by second, and when something doesn't happen inside that little box of time we set, we panic. We think it's late. We think it's over. But what if it's not late? What if it's actually right on time in God's plan? Think about it. We serve a God who doesn't measure time the way we do. The Bible even says that 1,000 years is like a day to him, and a day is like 1,000 years. In other words, he's not bound by your deadlines. He's not pressured by your calendar. He's not scrambling because you're turning 30 or 40 or 50 and you feel like your chance is slipping away. To him, your life is a canvas he's painting on. And sometimes he takes his time with the brushstrokes because he's crafting something beautiful. But I get it. It's frustrating. I remember times in my own life where I was desperate for something to happen by a certain date. Maybe it was a financial breakthrough, maybe it was an opportunity I thought I needed. Maybe it was even something I prayed for night after night. And the silence felt unbearable. It felt like God had forgotten me. But looking back now, I can see that what looked like a delay was actually preparation. He wasn't saying no. He was saying not yet. Let me give you an example. Think about Joseph in the Bible, the one with the coat of many colors. He had dreams of greatness as a teenager, but instead of stepping into glory right away, he went through betrayal, slavery, prison, and years of waiting. If you looked at Joseph's life through a human lens, you'd think, man, this guy is forgotten. He missed it. His timing is off. But from God's perspective, every single step was perfectly timed. Because when Joseph finally stood before Pharaoh, when he finally rose to power, it wasn't just about his dream. It was about saving a nation. If he had risen earlier, the famine wouldn't have come yet. His timing would have been off. But God's timing, it was exact. And this is where we struggle, right? We look at our lives and say, but God, I need this job by next month. I need this healing by tomorrow. I need this breakthrough by the end of the year. And when it doesn't happen, we feel crushed. But what if the thing you think is a delay is actually God saving you from a disaster you can't see yet? What if he's holding it back, not to punish you, but to protect you? I once heard someone say that God is like a master chess player. You might be stressing over your next move, thinking you're cornered, but he already sees 10 moves ahead. He knows what's coming. He knows the setup. He knows the best time to strike. And sometimes what feels like waiting to you is actually him positioning the board so that when the move comes, it's checkmate. Here's the truth. You cannot rush God's timing. You can try, but you'll end up exhausted. And you cannot slow it down either. When it's time, nothing can stop it. That's why some doors you've tried to push open didn't budge, because it wasn't time yet. And that's also why some doors swing open so easily you can't believe it, because when it's time, nothing can keep it closed. And that's what makes his timing so unbelievable. Because from the outside to people watching, it looks random. It looks sudden. It looks like, how did that even happen for you? They don't see the years of silence, the nights of prayer, the hidden battles you fought. They only see the breakthrough. And because it looks so out of nowhere, they laugh. They think it's ridiculous. But you know the years it took. You know the tears it cost. You know the patience it required. So here's the challenge for you, my friend. Stop measuring your life by human clocks. Stop panicking because your plan A, B, and C didn't happen on time. And start asking yourself, what if God's plan is bigger than my schedule? Because the first pattern, the one that will save you so much anxiety, is understanding that his timing is not yours. It's better. And when you really let that sink in, you stop forcing things. You stop rushing. You stop comparing your life to everyone else's highlight reel. You begin to rest, not because you've given up, but because you've realized the one holding your timeline is never late. The second pattern is this. God's timing often exposes what's hidden. See, we think of timing in terms of getting what we want, the promotion, the relationship, the opportunity. But sometimes, God delays not because you're unworthy or forgotten, but because there are things inside of you or around you that need to be revealed before you can step into that next season. Let me explain. When things don't happen on our schedule, frustration rises. Waiting has this strange way of pressing on us, squeezing out what's inside. And that's when the hidden stuff shows up. The impatience, the insecurity, the doubts, the old wounds we thought we had already healed from. We discover just how much we've been relying on our own strength. And this is uncomfortable. Honestly, it's painful. But it's necessary. Because here's the truth. Success without character is dangerous. Opportunity without preparation is overwhelming. Blessing without wisdom is wasted. God knows that if he gave you what you're asking for too soon, it could crush you instead of bless you. So instead, he allows timing to become a refining fire. The waiting season becomes the proving ground. Look back at Scripture. Think about Moses. He spent 40 years in the desert before he ever went back to Egypt to confront Pharaoh. Why? Because the desert exposed him. It broke his pride, his impatience, his self-reliance. By the time God called him through the burning bush, Moses wasn't the same man. He was stripped, humbled, dependent, and now he was ready. Here's the part that makes people laugh. When God finally moves, it looks sudden to everyone else. They'll say, "How did you get that opportunity? How did you rise so fast? How did you build that business or write that book or start that ministry?" They don't see the decades in the desert. They don't see the hidden refining. All they see is the result. And because they don't understand the process, they laugh. They call it luck. They call it random. But you know it wasn't. You know it was timing. And here's where it gets really personal. Some of you are in that desert season right now. You feel delayed. You feel unseen. You feel like everyone else is racing ahead while you're stuck in place. And maybe you've even thought, "God, what's wrong with me? Why not me yet?" But what if nothing is wrong with you? What if God's delay is actually his love? What if he's exposing, healing, and strengthening you so that when your moment comes, you don't just step into it, you thrive in it? I'll tell you something I learned in my own life. There was a time when I wanted to build my business faster, to hit those big milestones right away. I was grinding, hustling, and comparing myself to everyone else who seemed to be ahead. But I didn't realize that if I had gotten those results earlier, my mindset would have destroyed it. I didn't know how to handle pressure. I was still tied to old fears. I was still living to please people. And God knew. He knew that if he gave it to me, then I would have wasted it. So he delayed. And looking back now, I thank him for that delay. Because the person I was 5 years ago wasn't ready. The person I am now, I can handle it. And that's what I want you to hear today. God delays to develop. He lets timing expose what's hidden so it can be healed. He allows the waiting to shape you into someone who won't crumble under the weight of answered prayers. So if you're in that place, don't despise the delay. Don't misinterpret silence as absence. Don't think laughter means failure. Because when the appointed time comes, and it will, people will look at your breakthrough and say, "That's unbelievable." And they'll laugh. Not because you failed, but because they can't comprehend how something that looked so delayed could arrive so perfectly. And here's the twist. The very people who laughed at your waiting will be the ones in awe when your breakthrough comes. They'll realize that what they thought was wasted time was actually God's perfect timing. The third pattern is this. God's timing magnifies his glory. Let me explain what I mean in the simplest way, like I'm just sitting down with you as a friend. You know how sometimes we work so hard, plan everything down to the last detail, and when it happens, we're quick to give ourselves the credit? We think it's because of my grind, my connections, my intelligence. And maybe that's partly true, but it doesn't really leave space for God to be seen. But when things happen late, when they look impossible, when all human logic says it's over and nothing can change, that's where God steps in. And when he does, it's so obvious it wasn't you, it wasn't me, it wasn't anyone else. It was him. That's why his timing feels so unbelievable. If Sarah had a child at 30, no one would have noticed. But when she gave birth at 90, people laughed. Not just because it was unusual, but because it broke every law of reason. And that's the point. God's timing magnifies his glory by making the impossible undeniable. I've felt that in my own life. There were moments I thought certain doors were closed for good. Too much time passed, too many mistakes made, too many no's stacked up. I nearly convinced myself it wasn't meant to be. And then, out of nowhere, something better than what I originally asked for came along. And I knew. If it had happened earlier, I would have bragged about my skills, my hustle. But because it happened on his timing, I couldn't take the credit. It was too aligned, too perfect, too timely. All I could do was laugh in disbelief and give him glory. And you know what's fascinating? This isn't just our story. It's a pattern all throughout the Bible. The Israelites only saw the Red Sea part when there was no escape route left. Lazarus was raised when he had already been dead 4 days. Daniel wasn't pulled out before the lions came. He was rescued while already inside the den. It's almost as if God waits until the last second so that when the miracle comes, no one can say it was chance or human power. That's why people laugh. God's timing breaks the rules they live by. The world says if you don't hustle now, you'll miss it. If you don't achieve by 30, you're behind. But God's timing says, I don't operate by your deadlines. I don't need odds in your favor. I don't even need the situation to be possible. That contradiction makes people laugh because it offends logic. But it also proves that his timing isn't just about you. It's about glorifying him in front of everyone else watching. So here's the encouragement. Don't despise the laugh. Don't get discouraged when people roll their eyes at your faith or smirk at your prayers. Their laughter is actually a clue that you're in the territory where God works best. If it makes sense to everyone else, it probably doesn't require faith. But when it looks ridiculous, when people shake their heads, that's when you know God's timing is setting up something that will magnify his glory in a way no one can deny. When I look back now, the waiting seasons that made me doubt were the very seasons that positioned me for breakthroughs I could never have orchestrated. And maybe that's where you are right now. Waiting, feeling behind, even laughing at yourself for still believing. If that's you, let me remind you, stay faithful, keep believing. Because when God finally moves, it'll be so good, so impossible in human eyes, that even the laughers won't be able to deny it was him. The fourth pattern is this. God's timing tests your trust. And this is where things get really uncomfortable, because trust is not built when life is easy. It's built in the waiting, in the silence, in those seasons when nothing seems to move. Think about it. If everything you ask for came instantly, you wouldn't need faith. You just treat God like a vending machine. Insert prayer, get blessing. But God isn't after vending machine relationships. He's after deep trust. I've noticed in my own life that when I thought I was ready for a blessing, God didn't deliver it right away. Instead, he gave me a season of quiet, or even what felt like resistance. At first, I took it as rejection, but later I realized it was training. He wasn't saying no, he was saying not yet, because I'm building something in you. And trust me, that's a harder lesson than any book can teach. The Bible is full of this pattern. Joseph had dreams of leadership, but instead of being promoted right away, he was thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, falsely accused, and locked in prison. Why? Because before God put him in charge of saving nations, Joseph had to learn to trust God in the darkness. Abraham was promised descendants as numerous as the stars, but for years he and Sarah saw nothing. Every month was another test. Every year was another question. Do you still trust me? And it was only when trust matured that the promise came. And I think that's why we get so frustrated with God's timing. It's not just about the delay. It's about what the delay demands of us. It demands trust. And trust feels risky because it means letting go of control. But that's the very point. If we could control it, we wouldn't need him. Here's the paradox. The very seasons you hate, the quiet ones, the confusing ones, the painful ones, are often the seasons where God is preparing you to carry what you prayed for. Because wealth without trust turns into greed. Influence without trust turns into arrogance. Success without trust turns into idolatry. So God lets us walk through valleys, not to break us, but to forge us. And that's why when the breakthrough finally comes, it feels so different. You're not just grateful for the blessing, you're grateful for the God who carried you until it came. So if you feel like nothing is moving right now, let me just say this. Maybe the point isn't the thing you're waiting for. Maybe the point is what God is doing in you while you wait. Maybe the waiting isn't wasted. It's the very thing shaping you for what's ahead. And when you see it that way, you stop panicking about the delay and start asking a better question. God, what are you building in me right now? Because once you trust him in the unseen, you'll be ready to carry what everyone else will see. The fifth pattern is this. God's timing positions you for impact bigger than yourself. And this is where everything starts to make sense, because while we're usually thinking about our needs, our goals, our dreams, God is thinking generations ahead. His timing isn't just about you, it's about who will be blessed through you. Think about Joseph again. He dreamed about ruling, but when the fulfillment finally came, it wasn't just about him. It was about saving Egypt, saving Israel, and preserving the line that would eventually bring Jesus into the world. That's why the wait was so long, because the weight of the impact was so big. If God had answered Joseph's dream too soon, he would have ruined it. But by the time it came to pass, Joseph had the maturity to say, "What you meant for evil, God meant for good, to save many lives." That's legacy. Or think of Jesus waiting until he was 30 to begin his public ministry. He could have done miracles at 18. He could have preached at 20. But his timing was perfectly aligned with prophecy, with preparation, and with the people who would carry the message after him. The delay wasn't wasted. It was positioning. And here's the part that hits me personally. So many times in my own life, I thought the delay was God ignoring me, when really he was arranging the pieces for something way bigger than I could see. There were business ideas I had that didn't work out when I wanted them to. At the time, I was frustrated. But looking back, I see it was timing. The connections I needed weren't in place yet. The skills I needed weren't developed yet. And when the opportunity finally opened, I could step into it without collapsing under the weight. That's the power of God's timing. It magnifies his glory, tests your trust, and positions you for something that touches others. And here's the funny part. When it finally happens, people around you will laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's unbelievable. They'll laugh the way Sarah laughed when God told her she'd have a child in her old age. They'll laugh because what looked impossible for years suddenly becomes reality in a moment. So if you're in that waiting season right now, don't mistake it for rejection. Don't confuse silence with absence. God is arranging something you can't see yet. And when it finally comes together, it won't just bless you, it will overflow to others, and they'll know it wasn't you, it was him. And that's why I say God's timing is unbelievable. It doesn't fit our deadlines, it doesn't bow to our expectations, and it doesn't answer to our clocks. But when it comes, it's so much better than anything we could have forced. Now, I've walked you through these patterns, how his timing isn't our timing, how delays magnify his glory, how waiting tests our trust, and how it positions us for greater impact. The only question left is this: are you willing to trust him enough to let go of your calendar and lean into his? Let me wrap this up with a story. Before we end, I want to tell you about a man who didn't look like someone destined for greatness. As a boy, he grew up poor. His father died when he was only 5 years old, and his mother remarried a man who wasn't interested in raising him. He dropped out of school in the 6th grade, and by the time he was a teenager, he had already left home. He wandered from job to job, place to place, never really settling. He worked as a farmhand. He tried being a streetcar conductor. He enlisted in the army for a while. He tried law school but quit. He sold insurance, operated a steamboat, worked as a railroad fireman, and even tried running a service station. Every single time he thought something might stick, life would kick him back down. He was constantly broke, constantly starting over. By his 40s, many people already wrote him off as a failure. He had no stable career, no real direction, and nothing to show for years of hard work. But here's the thing: timing. At the time, it looked like delay. It looked like failure. But God was shaping him, preparing him, and building a resilience in him that he didn't even know he was going to need. When he was in his 60s after yet another setback, he started cooking chicken for travelers at his little gas station. People began to notice it wasn't just good, it was extraordinary. They told him he should sell it, but by then, he thought it was too late. Who starts a business in their 60s? But the timing wasn't his, it was God's. One door led to another. He perfected his recipe, began franchising, and by his 70s, what looked like a lifetime of wasted effort suddenly turned into something that impacted the world. His chicken recipe became Kentucky Fried Chicken, and his face became one of the most recognizable brands on earth. That man was Colonel Harlan Sanders. Now, why did I share this? Because it ties everything we've been talking about. God's timing isn't your timing. For decades, it looked like Sanders' life was nothing but failure after failure. If he had judged himself by human timing, he would have given up in his 40s. But what looked like delay was really preparation. God was building the story, the grit, and the character so that when the door finally opened, it would explode into something bigger than he could have imagined. The same is true for you. Maybe you feel like Joseph in the pit, or Sarah laughing at the idea of a miracle, or Sanders broke and tired in his 60s. But remember this, delay isn't denial. Timing is everything. God doesn't waste years, He prepares you in them. And when the breakthrough finally comes, people will laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's unbelievable. So the question I'll leave you with is this. Are you willing to trust the author of time enough to let him write your story at his pace? Because if you do, the timing of God will turn your greatest frustration into your greatest testimony.